Hi, I'm Jan, owner of the Cherry Pick Quilt Shop. Today we're going to show you how to make a very simple pillowcase out of some fabric. And just so you know, these are two different ones, but they're both very simple. They're both kind of made the same way. To start your pillowcase, first thing you need is, this is 3/4 of a yard. This is the big part of the pillowcase. This is 1/3 of a yard. So that makes the end of your pillowcase. Now, one of those pillowcases that we showed you does have trim on it, which we did put trim. You need 1/8 of a yard if you do trim. We don't necessarily put trim on all our pillowcases, but we'll show you the process here. So first thing you want to do is open your fabric up. Now, this fabric has an up and down, so you got to pay attention how you want your pillowcase to look. So I want my cuff to be on where the pumpkins are all going the same direction. So we're going to open it up, selvage to selvage. We're going to take the cuff piece, same thing, and we are going to put right sides together. And we are going to sew this a 1/4 inch seam, and we're not cutting the selvages off yet. That will be later. So we're going to sew this a 1/4 inch seam all the way down. And make sure while you're sewing that you're keeping, I didn't do any pinning because we are going to trim this later. Make sure you're sewing a 1/4 inch seam. Make sure you're keeping the edges even from the big part of the pillow and the cuff edges together. Okay, so we made it to the end. Now, one thing I want to show you is, this one happens to have the trim on it. So the trim has to go on before you sewed that piece on. So you take your trim that was 1/8 of a yard, and you press it in half, and you put it on the pillowcase first. Then you do exactly what I just did, which was put the cuff on there, and then you're going to sew all 3 levels together at one time. So then you have it that looks just like so. So there we are at this point. You do want to press this seam, and I have pressed it so that the trim is going down towards the pillowcase. This fabric also is directional, so kind of watch that. Next thing you want to do is lay this right side up, and you are going to start rolling from the bottom to the top. Keep going till this, what you've sewn together, flips up. Then you are going to pin this together all the way down, like, okay? Then you're going to sew it together. All right, that's where we are at this point. So we're going to flip to another pillowcase. Here we are, all sewn together. So you have a tube. So we rolled it, those edges met, and we sewed it together. Then we're going to pull it. And now we're going to pull right sides out. There we go. Okay, so see, we have no seam showing. It's a hidden seam. This is actually called a no seam pillowcase, but it's because the seams don't actually show. So we're at this point right here with our pillowcase. Next thing we want to do is press this cuff really good. Then you are going to lay these together, and now you're going to trim. You're basically trimming the selvage off. Okay, we've trimmed it. They're even. Next step is, now, one thing you want to do in a pillowcase is, you want to sew wrong sides together first. You also want to make sure that your seam at your cuff matches. And match it at the bottom. I pin it a little bit just so that I know it's kind of staying in place. And you do want to pin, I guess you would call that vertically. If you do it horizontally, you could get your pin caught in your presser foot, which I have done before. And you can break needles when you do that. All right, so then we're going to sew this a 1/4 inch seam all the way down. And we'll sew this one, and then I'll pull one of these pillowcases out and show you the next step. I do backstitch on this when I start just because it's a pillowcase. In quilting, you don't always have to backstitch because most of the time seams cross over, but on the pillowcase I do. When you come to your pin, take it out. I don't suggest you sew across them. This pillowcase fabric I happen to be using glows in the dark, so that would be a really fun pillowcase for grandchildren for Halloween. Okay, then we got to sew across the bottom, and I don't turn the corner, I take it out. Then we're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam across the bottom. And remember, this time, for the pillowcase, we did sew wrong sides together. So obviously you don't want your pillowcase to look like this. You don't want the seams to show. So now you're going to turn this pillowcase this direction. Now you're going to re-sew it. This time with right side, and you need to press this really good. Get those seams pressed really good. You're going to re-sew it right sides together. And this is actually called a French seam, so we'll show you this. So we put right sides together. We went back and re-sewed right sides together. So you have a French seam. So that's actually hiding your raw edges of your pillowcase. So then when you're sewing your right sides together, you go all the way, sew down your side, and then you have your pillowcase done. Press it really good, turn it back around, and you have a finished pillowcase ready to go. And they are very quick to make. They don't take any time at all. So once you get started, you got your pillowcase.